The late May sun blazed down on Riverside Community College's main quad, casting sharp shadows between the rows of white folding chairs. I adjusted my cap for the 100th time, the tassel catching the light breeze that carried the scent of freshly cut grass and the nervous excitement of 300 graduating students. Around me, my classmates chatted excitedly with their families, taking selfies and posing for group photos. The air buzzed with pride, accomplishment, and the promise of new beginnings. I scanned the crowd for my family, my heart doing that familiar dance between hope and dread. There they were, fifth row back, slightly to the left. Mom sat rigidly upright, her designer purse clutched tightly in her lap, wearing the same forced smile she'd perfected over the years. Dad looked uncomfortable in his rarely worn suit, constantly checking his phone. And there was Jessica, my 22-year-old sister, looking absolutely radiant in a flowing sundress that probably cost more than my textbooks for the entire semester. Jessica had always been the golden child. Where I was average height, with mousy brown hair and a tendency to blend into backgrounds, she was statuesque with glossy blonde hair that never seemed to have a bad day. Where I struggled through community college while working nights at Target to pay for my classes, she had sailed through her bachelor's degree at USC on a full-ride scholarship, thanks to her academic achievements and our parents' unwavering support. The irony wasn't lost on me that today, at my graduation, Jessica still managed to be the center of attention. Even from 50 feet away, I could see how other parents glanced at her admiringly, probably wondering whose beautiful daughter she was. Meanwhile, I felt invisible in my standard-issue black gown, just another face in the sea of graduates. "Maya Rodriguez!" The announcer's voice boomed across the quad. My heart hammered as I stood up from my assigned seat in the R section. This was it. After 2.5 years of juggling work, classes, and trying to prove myself worthy of my family's attention, I was finally graduating with my associate's degree in business administration. It wasn't Harvard, and it wasn't the bachelor's degree that Jessica had earned with honors, but it was mine. I had earned it through late nights, studying in the Target break room, through choosing textbooks over new clothes, through pushing myself when everyone else seemed to have already written me off as the other daughter. As I walked across the stage, my legs felt unsteady. The Dean of Students, Dr. Patricia Walsh, smiled warmly as she handed me my diploma. "Congratulations, Maya. We're proud of you," she said, her voice barely audible over the applause. For a moment I felt genuinely happy. I had done it. Despite everything, despite feeling like I was constantly playing catch-up to Jessica's achievements, I had accomplished something significant. I raised my diploma slightly, looking out toward my family with a genuine smile for the first time in months. Dad was clapping, though he was still glancing at his phone. Jessica was taking pictures, which was nice of her. And Mom was leaning toward Jessica, whispering something in her ear. Even from the stage, I could see Jessica's expression change from casual interest to surprise, then to something that looked almost like pity. My stomach dropped as I watched my mother's lips move, gesturing subtly toward me on the stage. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. I mechanically shook hands, accepted congratulations from my professors, and posed for the official graduation photo. But my mind was stuck on that moment. What had Mum said to Jessica? Why had Jessica looked at me with such pity? After the ceremony ended, I made my way through the crowd of celebrating families, my diploma clutched in my sweaty palm. My family was waiting by the refreshment table, where Dad was loading a paper plate with cookies and Jessica was checking her phone. "There's our graduate," Dad said with genuine warmth, pulling me into a hug that smelled like his cologne and coffee. "I'm proud of you, kiddo. I know it wasn't easy working and going to school at the same time." "Thanks, Dad," I managed, feeling a rush of emotion. At least someone acknowledged how hard I'd worked. "You look great up there, Maya," Jessica said, giving me a quick hug. But there was something different in her voice, something careful and measured that hadn't been there this morning. Mom stepped forward last, her smile looking more strained than usual. "Congratulations, dear," she said, giving me a brief, perfunctory hug. "You must be so relieved to finally be done. Finally be done. Not proud, not accomplished, relieved to be done, as if my education had been some sort of burden I'd been carrying. "Actually, I'm thinking about transferring to finish my bachelor's degree," I said, trying to inject some excitement into my voice. "I've been looking at Cal State programs, and with my GPA, I think I have a good shot at—" "Oh, honey," Mom interrupted, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I knew so well. "Don't you think you should focus on finding a stable job first? You're 24. Jessica already has her master's degree and is working at that prestigious marketing firm in downtown LA. The familiar sting of comparison hit me right in the chest. "I know, but speaking of Jessica's achievements," Mom continued, her voice growing more animated, "tell Maya about the promotion you're up for, sweetheart." Jessica shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, maybe we should focus on Maya today." "Day," but Mom was already launching into a detailed account of Jessica's career prospects, her voice filled with the kind of pride and excitement that had been noticeably absent when she'd congratulated me 5 minutes earlier. I stood there, diploma in hand, watching my mother's face light up as she talked about my sister's accomplishments at my own graduation. This was my life in a nutshell. No matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I worked, I would always be the supporting character in Jessica's success story. The crowd around us was thinning, other families heading to celebration dinners and parties. But here we were, at my graduation, talking about Jessica's job. "So where are we going for dinner?" I asked when Mom finally paused for breath. Dad and Jessica exchanged a glance. "Actually," Dad said carefully, "we made reservations at Il Fornaio for 4:30, but what?" I asked, though something cold was already settling in my stomach. "Well, it's just that it's such an expensive place," Mom said, her voice taking on that reasonable tone she used when she was about to deliver bad news. "And with Jessica's big presentation on Monday, we thought it might be nice to make it more of a family celebration. You understand, don't you? Maybe we could do something simple, just the 4 of us, at home instead." I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. "You made reservations at an expensive restaurant for my graduation dinner, but now you don't want to go because Jessica has a work presentation." "It's not that we don't want to go," Mom said quickly. "It's just that Jessica has been under so much stress, and this promotion could really set her up for—" "For what, Mom?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "For another success story that you can tell at my next graduation?" "Maya," Jessica said softly, "you don't have to make this into a big thing." But it was a big thing. It was the biggest thing that had ever happened to me, and my own family was treating it like an inconvenience that was getting in the way of their real priorities. The sun was starting to set behind the campus buildings, casting long shadows across the quad. Most of the other families had already left, probably off to their celebration dinners and parties. I looked at my parents, at Jessica with her uncomfortable expression, and realized that nothing was going to change. No matter what I accomplished, no matter how hard I worked, I would always be the afterthought, the consolation prize, the daughter who was good enough to get a diploma but not good enough to warrant a proper celebration. "You know what?" I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Let's just skip dinner altogether. I'm tired anyway." "Are you sure?" Dad asked, looking genuinely concerned. "We could still do something simple." "I'm sure," I lied. "I just want to go home and rest." As we walked toward the parking lot, I clutched my diploma tighter, the embossed seal pressing into my palm through the leather cover. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, but instead I felt smaller and more invisible than ever. The ceremony had ended, the photos had been taken, and once again, Maya Rodriguez had managed to be the star of her own show for exactly as long as it took to walk across a stage and shake a hand. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the weight of the diploma in my hands, or maybe it was the realization that I had actually accomplished something significant despite everyone's low expectations. For the first time in my life, I had concrete proof that I was capable of more than being Jessica's less impressive younger sister. I didn't know it yet, but this feeling, this tiny spark of self-worth that my family's indifference couldn't quite extinguish, was about to change everything. 3 days had passed since my graduation, and the diploma sat on my desk at home, still in its leather folder, unopened since the ceremony. Every time I looked at it, I felt a complicated mix of pride and disappointment that I couldn't quite shake. I'd gone back to work at Target the next day like nothing had happened, sliding back into my routine of scanning items, restocking shelves, and dealing with difficult customers. My co-worker, Marcus, had noticed something was off during our Tuesday evening shift. "You've been quiet since you got back," he said as we reorganized the electronics section. Marcus was one of the few people at work who knew I'd been going to school. He'd covered for me countless times when I needed to leave early for exams or group projects. "How was the graduation? Your family proud?" I shrugged, focusing intently on straightening a display of phone cases. "It was fine." "Just fine?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. He was a good guy, a few years older than me, working at Target to support his wife and baby daughter while he finished his nursing degree online. If anyone understood the struggle of working while going to school, it was him. "Maya, you graduated college. That's huge." "Associate's degree from community college," I corrected automatically, repeating the dismissive tone I'd heard so often from my family. "So, it's still college. It's still an accomplishment." Marcus stopped what he was doing and looked at me seriously. "Don't let anyone make you feel like it's not a big deal. I've watched you bust your ass for the last 2 years, studying in the break room, doing homework on your lunch breaks. You should be proud." His words hit me harder than I expected. Someone had noticed. Someone had seen how hard I'd worked. It wasn't my family, but it was something. "Thanks," I said quietly. "That means a lot." "And when do you start applying for transfer schools?" he asked. "I don't know if I'm going to," I admitted. "Maybe I should just focus on work, try to move up to supervisor or something." Marcus gave me a look that was part disappointment, part understanding. "That's not what you wanted 6 months ago." He was right. 6 months ago, I'd been excited about finishing my degree and transferring to a 4-year university. I'd researched programs, calculated costs, even started saving money for application fees. But that was before graduation day, before watching my mother's face light up talking about Jessica's career while barely acknowledging my achievement. The rest of my shift passed quietly. By the time I got home around 11 p.m., the house was dark except for the living room, where I could see the blue glow of the television. Mom was probably watching her nightly news programs, and Dad was likely already in bed. Jessica had moved back home temporarily after college to save money while she established her career, a decision that my parents had praised as financially smart when she did it, though they'd called me unmotivated for doing the same thing. I headed straight to my room, but as I passed the living room, I heard Mom on the phone. Her voice carried that excited, animated tone she got when she was talking to one of her sisters about Jessica's latest achievements. "And they're considering her for the junior executive position," Mum was saying. "Can you believe it? Not even a year out of college, and she's already being promoted. We're so proud." I paused in the hallway, hidden in the shadows. "Maya? Oh, she graduated from community college this week," Mum continued, her tone noticeably flatter. "Yes, finally. 2.5 years for a 2-year degree, but she was working, so... Anyway, Jessica's presentation is tomorrow. The whole management team will be there." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Finally graduated, as if I'd been dragging my feet, as if I hadn't been working 30 hours a week to pay for school while maintaining a 3.4 GPA, as if my education had been an inconvenience that everyone was relieved to see end. I made it to my room and closed the door quietly, then sat on my bed, staring at the diploma folder on my desk. 2.5 years, hundreds of hours of studying, thousands of dollars in tuition that I'd paid myself, countless times choosing school over social events, work over sleep, determination over doubt. And to my mother, I had finally graduated, as if it had been some sort of burden she'd been waiting for me to finish. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Mom told me what she said on the phone. I'm sorry. You know she doesn't mean it the way it sounds." But that was the thing. She did mean it exactly the way it sounded. This wasn't a misunderstanding or poor word choice. This was how my mother genuinely viewed my accomplishments, as lesser versions of Jessica's successes, inconvenient footnotes in the story of her golden child. I texted back, "It's fine. Good luck with your presentation tomorrow." Jessica responded immediately, "Want to get coffee this weekend? Just us?" I stared at the message for a long time. Jessica wasn't malicious. She had never deliberately tried to overshadow me, and she'd often seemed uncomfortable with the blatant favoritism our parents showed her. But she also didn't actively challenge it, and sometimes I wondered if she even fully recognized how differently we were treated. "Maybe," I finally texted back. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking about Marcus's words, about the pride in his voice when he talked about my graduation. I thought about Dr. Walsh's warm smile when she handed me my diploma, about the genuine congratulations from my professors who had watched me work so hard for this moment. Then I thought about Mom's phone call, about the dismissive way she'd summarized 2.5 years of my life in one casual sentence. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of excited voices in the kitchen. Jessica was getting ready for her big presentation, and Mom was fussing over her like she was preparing for the Olympics. "Did you remember your portfolio? What about the backup flash drive?" Mom was saying as I poured coffee. "And make sure you speak clearly. Project your voice. Remember, confidence is key." Dad looked up from his newspaper. "Morning, Maya. How was work last night?" "Fine," I said, grateful that he'd asked. "Jessica's presenting her marketing campaign to the senior management team today," Mom announced, as if this were breaking news that should interest everyone in a 5-mile radius. "That's great," I said, and I meant it. I was happy for Jessica. I just wish my own achievements could generate even a fraction of this enthusiasm. "She's been preparing for weeks," Mom continued. "This could really launch her career. Imagine, not even a year out of college and already making such an impression." There it was again, the implicit comparison. Jessica was succeeding quickly, efficiently, impressively. I, on the other hand, had taken too long to do too little. "I need to get ready for work," I said, heading toward the stairs. "Wait," Jessica called after me. She followed me into the hallway, away from our parents. "Maya, I want you to know that I think what you accomplished is amazing. Working and going to school isn't easy." "Thanks," I said, though her words felt complicated. It was nice to hear, but it also highlighted how rarely I heard anything like it from our parents. And I meant what I said about coffee. I'd really like to spend some time together, just us. Things have been weird lately. Weird was one way to put it. "Yeah, okay. This weekend?" Jessica smiled, looking relieved. "Great. I'll text you after my presentation." I watched her go back to the kitchen, where Mom immediately resumed her enthusiastic coaching. For a moment, I let myself imagine what it would feel like to have Mom that invested in my success, that excited about my achievements. What would it feel like to walk into a room and have her face light up with pride instead of that polite, distant smile I'd grown so accustomed to? Work that day was busy, which was good because it kept me from overthinking. But during my lunch break, I found myself sitting in my car in the parking lot, staring at the Cal State application I'd pulled up on my phone weeks ago. The deadline for spring admission was still months away. I had time to get my transcripts together, write my personal statement, apply for financial aid. 6 months ago, this had been my plan. Graduate from community college, transferred to a 4-year university, finally proved to everyone, including myself, that I was capable of more than they expected. But sitting there in the Target parking lot, eating a granola bar and trying to ignore the doubt that had been growing since graduation day, I wondered if it was worth it. What if I spent 2 more years working my ass off, accumulating debt and stress, only to graduate and have Mum tell people that I finally finished college at 26? What if my bachelor's degree got the same lukewarm reception as my associate's degree? What if nothing I ever did would be enough to earn the kind of pride and excitement that Jessica generated just by existing? My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Presentation went amazing. They loved the campaign. "Drinks with the team tonight to celebrate." I stared at the message, waiting for the familiar sting of jealousy, but instead I felt something different, something that might have been clarity. This was my life. This was my family, and unless I did something to change my situation, this was how it was always going to be. I could keep hoping that someday my parents would see my worth, keep working twice as hard for half the recognition, keep settling for being the supporting character in Jessica's story, or I could take control of my own narrative. I opened the Cal State application and started filling it out. By the time I got home from work that night, Jessica was already there, glowing with success and sharing every detail of her triumphant presentation with our parents. Mom was hanging on every word, asking follow-up questions and making plans to call all the relatives with updates. Dad was beaming with pride, already talking about Jessica's bright future and unlimited potential. I slipped upstairs to my room without joining the celebration. I had my own future to think about. Saturday morning came with the kind of crisp November air that made Los Angeles feel almost seasonal. I met Jessica at our usual coffee shop, a small independent place in Silver Lake that served overpriced lattes and attracted an eclectic mix of artists, college students, and people like us who needed neutral territory for complicated conversations. Jessica was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table by the window, scrolling through her phone with that satisfied glow that had been radiating from her since her successful presentation 3 days earlier. She looked up as I approached, and her smile seemed genuinely warm. "Hey, I already ordered for you," she said, gesturing to a large iced coffee with extra cream. "Your usual." "Thanks." I sat down across from her, noting how put together she looked, even on a casual Saturday morning. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves, and her makeup looked effortless, but probably took 20 minutes to achieve. Everything about Jessica always looked effortless. "So," she said, setting down her phone and giving me her full attention, "how are you feeling? About graduation? About everything?" It was such a simple question, but no one had asked me that since my diploma had been handed to me a week ago. How was I feeling? Invisible, disappointed, angry, determined, confused, like I was finally waking up from a long dream of trying to please people who would never be pleased. "Honestly, I don't know," I said. "It feels anticlimactic." Jessica nodded slowly. "I get that. Sometimes big moments don't feel as big as you thought they would." "It's not that it didn't feel big," I clarified. "It's that no one else seemed to think it was big." The words hung between us for a moment. Jessica shifted in her chair, looking uncomfortable. "Maya, you know Mom and Dad are proud of you, right? They show it differently than they do with me." "Do they?" I asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like they don't show it at all." Jessica sipped her latte, clearly trying to figure out how to navigate this conversation. "You know it's not easy for me either, right? Having everyone expect me to be perfect all the time?" I almost laughed. "Are you seriously trying to tell me that being the favorite child is hard?" "That's not what I meant." "Jessica, Mom literally dismissed my entire college experience as something I finally finished, like it was some sort of burden everyone was waiting for me to complete. Meanwhile, she calls half the family to brag about your quarterly reports at work." Jessica set down her coffee and looked at me directly. "You heard that phone call?" "I hear all the phone calls. I've been hearing them my entire life." I felt something loosening in my chest, like a dam that had been holding back years of accumulated frustration. "Do you want to know what it's like being your sister? It's like being a backup singer who never gets to perform a solo. Everything I do gets measured against what you've already done better." "That's not fair," Jessica said quietly. "I never asked to be compared to you, and I never asked for our parents to treat us differently. But you also never challenged it." The words came out harder than I intended, but I didn't take them back. "You never once told Mom to stop using my achievements as opportunities to talk about yours. You never suggested that maybe my graduation dinner shouldn't be cancelled because you have a work presentation." Jessica's face flushed. "You want me to feel guilty for succeeding? I want you to acknowledge that your success has come at the cost of my invisibility." I leaned forward, trying to make her understand. "I'm not asking you to fail, Jess. I'm asking you to see that our parents have created this dynamic where there can only be one successful daughter, and it's always been you." We sat in silence for a moment, the background noise of the coffee shop filling the space between us. I watched Jessica process what I'd said, saw the moment when she really started to understand. "I do see it," she said finally. I don't know how to fix it." You don't have to fix it," I said. "I'm going to fix it myself." "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the Cal State application I'd been working on. I'm transferring. I'm going to finish my bachelor's degree. Jessica's eyes widened. Maya, that's amazing. Why didn't you tell us? Because I needed to be sure it was what I wanted, not what I thought would finally make Mom and Dad proud of me. I closed the application and put my phone away. I spent so many years trying to get their approval that I lost track of what I actually wanted for myself. And what do you want? For the first time in a long time, I felt clear about the answer. I want to prove to myself that I'm capable of more than everyone expects. I want to build a life that I'm proud of, regardless of whether anyone else is impressed by it. Jessica smiled, and for the first time, it didn't feel complicated or loaded with unspoken comparisons. I think that's incredible. Do you? Because I need you to know that I'm done competing with you. I'm done trying to be a version of myself that fits into the shadow you cast. I'm going to do things my way at my pace, for my reasons. Good, Jessica said firmly. You should. And for what it's worth, I've always thought you were braver than me. That surprised me. Braver? You're the one with the perfect grades and the impressive job and I'm the one who's never had to fight for anything. Jessica interrupted. Everything came easily to me. School, jobs, our parents' approval. You've had to work for everything you've accomplished, and you kept going even when it was hard. That's brave. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. I never thought of it that way. Well, you should. And you should also know that I'm going to support whatever you decide to do, even if our parents don't understand it at first. We talked for another hour, covering territory that we'd never explored before. Jessica admitted that she sometimes felt guilty about the favoritism, but hadn't known how to address it without seeming ungrateful or drawing attention to it. I told her about all the times I'd felt invisible, all the achievements that had gone uncelebrated, all the ways I'd diminished my own accomplishments to avoid making waves. It wasn't a perfect conversation, and it didn't undo 24 years of family dynamics, but it was a start. For the first time, I felt like Jessica and I were talking as equals, rather than as the favorite and the afterthought. When we finally left the coffee shop, Jessica hugged me tighter than usual. I'm proud of you, she said. I should have said that at your graduation, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of you for everything you've accomplished, and I'm proud of you for deciding to go after what you want. Thank you, I said, and meant it. But as I drove home, I realized that feeling supported by Jessica was only part of the equation. The real test would come when I told my parents about my decision to transfer. Based on their track record, I had a feeling that conversation wasn't going to go as smoothly. That evening at dinner, I decided to bite the bullet. I have some news, I announced as Mum served her famous lasagna. I'm applying to transfer to Cal State Northridge for the spring semester. Dad looked up from his plate, eyebrows raised. That's great, honey. What would you study? Business administration, but I'm thinking about adding a minor in marketing. I glanced at Jessica, who gave me an encouraging nod. That sounds wonderful, Dad continued. When would you start? If I get accepted next spring, I'd probably need to cut back my hours at work, but I've been saving money and I can apply for financial aid. Mum had been unusually quiet during this exchange, cutting her lasagna into precise squares without eating any of it. Mum, I prompted, what do you think? She looked up with that expression I knew well, the one that meant she was about to deliver an opinion disguised as helpful advice. Well, sweetheart, I just wonder if this is the best time. You're 24 years old. Most people your age already have their bachelor's degrees and are established in their careers. She glanced meaningfully at Jessica. Don't you think it might be more practical to focus on advancing at Target? You could probably make supervisor in a year or two. I felt the familiar sting of her lukewarm response, but this time it was accompanied by something else. Clarity. This was exactly what I'd expected, and exactly what I was choosing to stop accepting. Actually, Mom, I think this is the perfect time. I have work experience, I know what I want to study, and I'm more focused now than I was at 18. But the cost, Mom continued, and you'd be starting over at a new school with students who are years younger than you. Mom! Jessica's voice was firm. Maya's decision to go back to school is admirable. She's worked hard to get to this point, and we should be supporting her. Mom looked surprised by Jessica's intervention. Of course we're supporting her. I just want her to think realistically about what? I interrupted. About staying in my lane? About not reaching too high? About accepting that I'll always be behind Jessica academically and professionally? Maya, that's not what I meant, isn't it? I set down my fork and looked directly at my mother. Mom, I graduated from college a week ago and you couldn't even get through the congratulatory phone call without bringing up Jessica's job. When have you ever encouraged me to dream bigger or reach higher? When have you ever expressed the kind of excitement about my future that you show for Jessica's quarterly performance reviews? The table went quiet. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably, and Jessica was staring at her plate. I've always supported your education, Mom said defensively. You've tolerated it, I corrected. There's a difference. Mom's face flushed. That's not fair, Maya. I've never said anything against your schooling. You've never said anything for it either. I stood up from the table. But that's okay. I don't need your enthusiasm to know that this is the right choice for me. Where are you going? Dad asked as I headed toward the stairs. To work on my application essays, I said. I have a future to build. As I climbed the stairs, I could hear the tense conversation continuing in the dining room. Jessica's voice advocating for me. Dad trying to mediate. Mom defensive and confused about why her realistic perspective was being challenged. I didn't care anymore. For the first time in my life, I was done seeking their approval and ready to create my own definition of success. 6 months later, the Cal State Northridge campus buzzed with the energy of finals week. Students clustered around picnic tables with laptops and coffee cups, stress and determination radiating from every corner of the quad. I sat under a large oak tree, reviewing my notes for my final business ethics exam, when my phone rang. Maya Rodriguez, this is Jennifer Chen from Pacific Marketing Solutions. I'm calling about your internship application. My heart jumped. Pacific Marketing Solutions was a mid-sized firm in Burbank, exactly the kind of place where I could get hands-on experience in digital marketing while finishing my degree. I'd sent my application 3 weeks ago and had been checking my email obsessively ever since. Yes, hi, thank you for calling. I'd like to schedule an interview for next week. Your application was impressive. Your work experience combined with your academic focus makes you exactly what we're looking for in an intern. After we scheduled the interview for Tuesday morning, I sat back against the tree, grinning. 6 months ago, I'd been invisible at my own graduation. Now I was a junior at Cal State with a 3.7 GPA, interviewing for internships at marketing firms, and finally building the future I'd always wanted. The transition hadn't been easy. Moving from community college to a 4-year university was like jumping from a kiddie pool to the deep end of an Olympic pool. The coursework was more demanding, the pace faster, and I'd had to learn to navigate a much larger, more competitive environment. But I'd also discovered something important. I was good at this. Not just adequate, not just scraping by. I was actually talented at marketing and business strategy. My professors had noticed. Dr. Martinez, who taught my consumer behavior class, had recommended me for the dean's list. Professor Williams had asked me to be a peer tutor for struggling students in statistics. For the first time in my academic career, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The changes at home had been more complicated. Mom had eventually come around to supporting my transfer, though she still occasionally made comments about how long it was taking me to finish my education. Dad had been genuinely proud when I made the dean's list, and he'd started asking more questions about my classes and career plans. Jessica and I had grown closer, having honest conversations about family dynamics and supporting each other's individual paths. But the real change had been internal. I'd stopped measuring my progress against Jessica's timeline and started focusing on my own goals. I'd stopped seeking approval for decisions that were mine to make. Most importantly, I'd started celebrating my own achievements instead of waiting for others to validate them. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Coffee tomorrow? I have news. I smiled and texted back. Can't tomorrow. Have an interview. But yes, to coffee after. Good news, I hope? The best news. I'll call you tonight. As I packed up my study materials and headed to class, I reflected on how different my life looked now compared to 6 months ago. I had a clear academic path, potential career opportunities opening up, and relationships that felt more authentic and balanced. I also had something I'd never had before, confidence in my own worth that didn't depend on anyone else's opinion. My ethics final went well, and by Thursday I'd finished all my exams for the semester. The internship interview had gone better than expected. Jennifer Chen had been impressed with my work portfolio and the marketing project I'd developed for a local non-profit as part of my community engagement class. They were going to let me know by the end of the week. Friday evening, I was at home grading papers for Professor Williams. My peer tutoring had expanded into a paid teaching assistant position when Jessica knocked on my bedroom door. "Come in," I called. She entered with 2 cups of coffee and a huge smile. "Okay, I couldn't wait for coffee tomorrow. I had to tell you now." "What's going on?" I asked, closing my laptop and giving her my full attention. "I got promoted." She practically bounced as she handed me my coffee. "Senior account.